Hey guys, it's Miss Miles. We just talked about the characteristics of life. So we're going to spend some time talking about viruses today, and why most scientists don't consider viruses to be living. Viruses have been in the news a lot, especially with COVID, the coronavirus. But many scientists still debate as to whether or not viruses are actually considered living. You're going to need your workbook today. We're going to take notes, not really notes, but we're going to do a couple of problems in your workbook based on the characteristics of life. And then on your home page for your Canvas assignments, if you'll click on 1.09 viruses, that's going to bring up your main assignment for the day. Also, at the top of that assignment, there is an article. And then if you click on that, it takes you to a website called Ask a Biologist. And that's what this website looks like. It's a website that's published by Arizona State University. And then this goes through and asks the question, are viruses alive? And then it goes through and tells you why or why not scientists believe that they're, not really considered alive. It goes through the characteristics of life. Living things have cells, and then you'll have to read, well, do viruses really have cells? Living things reproduce. Well, how do viruses reproduce? Living things use energy. Well, how do viruses use energy? Living things respond to their environment. Well, how do viruses react to their environment? So, most of those characteristics of life that we talked about yesterday, viruses sort of skirt the rim of most of those characteristics. And then at the bottom of that, it says, well, what's the final answer? Well, scientists are still debating on that, but I know when we get to classification of organisms, we do not have a classification spot for viruses. So we, for the most part, do not consider them to be living. But they cause a lot of problems for something that we really don't consider to be living. So that assignment 1.09, once you pull it up, you can go back and forth between that website and this assignment. And then you can just read your document there and answer your questions. Living things have cells. Do viruses have cells? So you need a yes or a no, but then you need to explain. You're not going to get credit on this if you just say yes or no and you don't put forth any effort to do an explanation. Number two, living things reproduce. Explain how viruses reproduce. So again, that's an explanation there. Living things use energy. Do viruses use energy? And then you need to explain that. Living things respond to their environment. Do viruses? And then you need to explain that. And then number five, are viruses alive? That can be your opinion. There used to be a podcast, and I know I just saw on this, it says listen to the podcast and give your opinion and the reasons why. They took down the podcast, but at the bottom of that page on Are Viruses Alive, there is a video on the coronavirus. And they update that occasionally. And this one says COVID Sim. So that's kind of a cool thing. But if you're looking for the podcast, I meant to change that on there. There really isn't a podcast anymore. It was a really good podcast, and I'm sorry that they took that down. But really, after you read the article, just give your opinion there. Are viruses alive? And then, yes or no, and why do you think they are? Why do you think they're not? And then list 3 diseases caused by viruses. You can Google that. But we probably already know a couple of viruses that are, causing havoc out there. And then I want you to copy and paste 4 pictures of viruses. So just go and find a picture of a virus. Some viruses look like they're tiny machines. Some viruses are more round, but viruses, they're just able to just sort of work their way into cells, and then they cause a lot of problems for us. But then also make sure to include the name of each virus that you include. I'm going to go to my other platform here, and we're going to actually start on a little review of what we did yesterday, looking at the characteristics of life and organizing things based on size. So we're looking at page 9 on our workbook. So if you'd like to turn to page 9, it's asking you to put these things in order by size, which is kind of a cool thing. So if you look at this, number 1 says a cell reproduces by dividing. So is a cell the smallest thing? Well, I don't know. Let's keep reading. Number 2 asks you to look at a multicellular animal obtains nutrients. Number 3, the genetic code of a piece of DNA. Number 4, the effects on the atmosphere of burning fossil fuels. And number 5, the response of all the plants in a region to a change in climate. So, what it's wanting you to do there is place the following biological processes in order from smaller to larger, according to the scale at which they would be studied. So, it's really wanting us to start with the smallest thing and work our way up. So, I would think that the smallest thing on here, and I don't know why my text box isn't working, but the smallest thing on here would probably be DNA. I think we could all agree that DNA is very small. Since it's inside cells, it's going to be smaller than an actual cell. The next thing would probably be number 1. A cell is very tiny for sure, but DNA, being inside of a cell, would be smaller than an actual cell. So remember, according to the characteristics of life, living things have to be made of cells, but really, a living organism only has to have one cell to be considered living. So the next thing that would probably be something that would be greater in size would be a multicellular organism. So we could look at a multicellular animal there. And then the next two things, we're looking at 4 or we're looking at 5, and I'll just move this so you can see 5. 4, the effects on the atmosphere of burning fossil fuels. And then number 5, the response of all the plants in a region to a change in climate. So we just went with multicellular. I think we should go with all the plants. And then we should get even bigger and look at the whole entire atmosphere. So if we were to study these things, these topics here, and look at them as far as a size range would go, this would probably be the size that we would be looking at. We would be looking at DNA. And then a cell, then a multicellular organism, and then all the plants in a particular environment, and then the effects on the whole entire atmosphere. So that's just looking at what we've been talking about and putting a size or a scale proportion to it, and I just wanted to mention that today. So that's page 9. So I'm hoping you're able to complete that. Getting back to viruses, I just have this picture here of viruses. So this is HIV. We know that that's the virus that causes AIDS. This is hepatitis. Hepatitis can really affect your liver and be very detrimental. People that get hepatitis, you can get that several different ways. Sometimes, there's hepatitis A, there's hepatitis B, there's hepatitis C. Sometimes that can be transmitted just from not washing your hands. So just make sure you're always washing your hands. Ebola, that was in the news definitely a couple of summers ago. Ebola is a very, very dangerous disease. It usually causes hemorrhages from every part of the body. The Ebola virus is a very dangerous virus. We're not really even sure now where that virus has come from, where it's initiated from. So it's kind of a scary virus. We have adenovirus, the influenza. We know what the flu is. Rabies virus. You always have to get your pets vaccinated against rabies. The bacteriophages, they are very interesting. They almost look like machines. Bacteriophages, these will be the types of viruses that are so small that they affect or infect bacterial cells. So viruses are even smaller than bacterial cells. And then you have several different viruses on the bottom here. So viruses can be transmitted through contact with other humans, but through not washing your hands and things like that. So just make sure you're always being very careful and doing everything that you can do so you're not transmitting a virus. So Are viruses alive or not? Well, that is a good question. They don't meet many of the criteria that we consider as characteristics of life, so it's sometimes hard to classify them. One thing that I did want to show you is the lytic cycle. This is how viruses reproduce. This is the main reason scientists don't really believe that viruses are alive. When you have a viral infection, a virus has to attach to your cell. Once it attaches to your cell, it's going to insert its DNA in your cell, and really, it's going to start replicating itself. Your cell starts making more virus. Eventually, those cells have virus particles in there, and eventually that cell bursts open and it releases more virus in to your body. I'm going to show you a quick video here. This is the lytic cycle. And if I can play this, okay, there it is. And we'll get started watching the lytic cycle. Maybe if it's playing. Is it playing? Oh, maybe it's my volume turned down. No, I don't think it's playing. Hold on. Okay. Well, it was showing just a second ago. Let me pull it back up again. The lytic cycle animation, and here it is. Okay. Possibly.
Fact, bacteria taking over the host cell's genetic material in
There we
order
go.
to reproduce itself. The bacteriophage lytic cycle is a method of viral replication that results in a destruction of the infected cell. The first stage of the cycle is attachment. To bind to a host cell, there must be specific receptors on the bacterial membrane to attach to. This determines a phage's host range. Once attached, the phage enzyme drills a hole in a bacterial wall and ejects its genom into the bacterial cytoplasm. The DNA of the host cell is broken down, and the viral DNA takes over the creation of viral proteins and nucleic acids. After many copies of viral components are made, they are assembled into complete viruses. The phage then creates an enzyme that breaks down the bacterial cell wall, lysozyme, allowing the newly formed phages to break out and infect other cells.
That is so incredible. It's almost like a machine, and a little scary, I think. So another cycle that goes along with the lytic cycle is called the lysogenic cycle. The lysogenic cycle is very much similar to the lytic cycle, except that the lysogenic cycle can last longer. So some viruses can remain dormant in your body for years and years, and then somehow they just get activated. So this is just a little animation showing the lysogenic cycle.
In a lysogenic cycle, viral nucleic acid becomes part of the host cell's chromosome and is replicated with it. Eventually, the virus enters a lytic cycle and kills the host cells. A bacteriophage attaches to a bacterial host cell by locking onto a specific receptor site on the surface of the host cell. The virus then injects its DNA into the host cell. Once inside the cell, the viral DNA inserts itself into a specific site in the chromosome of the host cell. Viral DNA is then called a provirus. During cell reproduction, the host cell copies the provirus genes along with its own DNA. The provirus is inactive at this time. When the cell divides, both the host genes and the provirus genes are passed on to the two daughter cells. At any time, a provirus may leave the host chromosome and enter a lytic cycle. When this happens, the host cell's DNA is broken down and new virus parts are produced and assembled. Eventually, the cell ruptures and new virus particles are released.
Okay, so the lytic cycle and the lysogenic cycle are very similar to each other. The lytic cycle is just showing how a virus is going to reproduce in your cells. And then the lysogenic cycle is just a longer period of time, where it's almost like the viral DNA hides within our DNA in our cells. And then it can just come forth for whatever reason. It could be stress, it could be another sickness, could cause then that virus to go through the lytic cycle, and it starts reproducing and making more virus. So, some people that especially have AIDS, or they have an HIV infection, um, there are medicines now, there are antivirals that those people can take, and it really um, calms down, lowers their viral load. And so sometimes it's so low that you can't even detect that virus with a blood test. However, um, once infected with AIDS, once infected with things like hepatitis, it's always in your body. So that DNA is really just hiding there in your cell. It may never go through the lytic cycle, but something may prompt that to just start going through the lytic cycle and to start reproducing. So we're finished with the video. What you need to do now is go to your website, the Ask a Biologist website. You have links there on Canvas. You need to read this article. It's a pretty short article. The pictures are pretty good. Go through there and read that. And then as you are going through, complete your um, paper here, complete your assignment. The only thing, there is no podcast down at the bottom. They've changed that. There is a video there that you'll need to watch, though. About the coronavirus, and then list 3 diseases caused by viruses, and then copy and paste 4 pictures of viruses, and make sure to include the name. Now, remember to copy and paste. You can go Control C to copy, Control V to paste, but there are also, other ways over here to add those things in. So you may have to go to Add Media. And once you go to Add Media, go to your computer, and you might be able to pull up that file. If that Control C and Control V do not work for you, you can do Command Shift 3 to screenshot the entire screen, or Command Shift 4 to screenshot a portion of a screen. And so that will then be downloaded onto your desktop, and then you can access probably by going to your file folder there. And that just pulled up my file folders. So if you'll go to your file folder, it'll help you to access any of those screenshots or any of those images that you save on your computer. Okay, and I hope that was helpful. And let's go do some biology. Thanks. Bye.